Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at not one, not one, but two Asus Maximus VIII Extremes, and that is because there is two now. We have the regular Extreme and then we have the Extreme Assembly. Different box. Should give you a slight hint on what's inside. But the other thing to contend with is this board here, which we used to of being the most expensive one, is £325 at Overclockers. Yet this one, and this is actually quite a cheap price for this one, is £475. Now, generally, the Maximus VIII Extreme would have been the top flagship board, but the Extreme Assembly goes that little bit further, pushing the envelope that little bit more. But does it really? That's really what we're here to find out. May seem like a strange way of going about it, but before we actually get down to the nitty-gritty of looking at the boards, it's also a good idea to look at what comes in the box, because with these two, there is a fairly big difference. So we've got on the left, we've got the Assembly, and then on the right, we have the normal Extreme. Now with the normal Extreme in the box, you do get your back plate that you'd be used to, a selection of, well, good selection of SATA cables. You've also got some temperature sensors that you can fit throughout the board as well. You have the front panel adapter, which I will show you for the overclock bay in a moment. We have Bluetooth and wireless antenna. Then you've got some ROG Black branded SLI bridges, which I will personally be sticking these in my collection, although I do have the flashy ROG ones, which you'll see later. But you do get the ROG Overclock Module, which you can attach to your system, but you can have it stood up on your desk. My one's actually fallen off. Maybe they don't want you to put it on your desk anymore. They used to have a little doodah on the back. Anyway, right, so we have that, but also what you can do is, and it goes in the bay, in the little mount, so that you can use this in the front. I would personally say that the cable that it comes with isn't particularly long enough to make you to be able to use it tidily, and because it's not long enough, it also makes it very difficult to use it on your desk. And I've always taken a personal hatred towards these things, and I'm still 100% there. It's a bit of a gimmick, and at the end of the day, it will be something that you'll play with maybe once, and then you won't really use it again, and you'll end up just sacking it off. When we move over to the other side, door hanger. Game on, you shall not pass. Game off, you may enter. What if you're fapping? You need a fapping one. Anyway, right, so moving on to the other side. Discs, we've got more of the temperature sensors, it's good. And then we have back plate, lovely. And then we have stickers for your hard drive labels and stuff. These are fan stickers. These come with both, by the way. I've just realised that we didn't pick those out. Now the door hanger, it's slightly different. As you can see, there's a little bit more orange. So you get orangey on one, you get reddy on the other. That's your manual. Then this is the adapter cable for something I'll show you in a moment. That's another adapter cable. Right, then we have a load more SATA cables. Lovely. We've got some screws to mount said adapter. Now this first adapter, this is a headphone amp and DAC, and it's technically a USB amp. You have an internal USB adapter which you use, and then it takes a 6-pin PCI Express. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to have infinite amounts of graphics cards in the boards, but if you were to end up with a good selection, this may end up needing to be attached to a Molex. But anyway, considering that it's designed for the old front panels, then getting a PCI Express up there may be a little bit of a ball ache. Anyway, we have one of these. There isn't really, as far as I can tell, any way that you can tidy this up to use it on your desk, because obviously, and I'm a great ambassador for no optical bays. So if you don't have an optical bay case, and there are quite a few of them about now, thank the Lord, there doesn't appear to be any way that you can tidy this up, so you're going to have to get your moddy friends out. Also, like I said, you've still got that 6-pin there, so it does get kind of difficult. So unless you're going to actually end up using this, this may end up being like the front base. But there is another gadgety, tooly type of blingy, wowie. Now you're thinking to yourself, Tom, it's just an add-in card. Yes, but it's for 10 GBE LAN. So you're used to gigabit LAN. This is 10 gigabit LAN, and you get the add-in card to support it. Now you do need proper copper, either Cat6 or Cat7. I think the Cat6 needs to be 600 hertz, proper full-blown Cat6 cable to be able to use this to its full whack, or the new Cat7 cables. And you know, we're just having a look around. You can see that we've got the ROG Express, and I'm assuming that's going to light up now. I will say to you straight away, I can't properly test this because I haven't got any other. You'd need 2 of these basically, because it's a waste of time me connecting this to a gigabit connector at the other end, because you would just get gigabit speeds. So it does get mighty complicated. But this is the type of thing that I'm going to say it's all about future-proofing. I will also say I've had a look online as well, and even horrible Chinese green things for 10 GBE add-in cards like this are starting around the £100 mark. So, you know, something like this, which is actually black PCB, all covered up nice. You know, there's no way of putting it that it is an expensive add-on. So there we have it. The 2 boards side by side. Now, first things first, as you can see, the Extreme Assembly has got a lot of orange accents going on. They've carried the orange up onto the top of the MOSFET cooler over here. I'd say that there's a lot more orange going on this now than there is red going on this. I'd say this is predominantly more like a gunmetal grey. And then you've got the odd red accent. This is actually more of a sort of a darker grey. There's almost the essence. I want to say there's. If you understand your colours, you understand what I mean. When that is quite close to like a bronzy grey. But anyway, we're not going to flap over my terminology of trying to explain colours. They're essentially under everything. They're the same board. There's just some different styling options going on. There are some very incredibly marginal differences in that the heatsink over here, the plastic for the ROG logo, actually comes out from the heatsink itself, whereas this one doesn't. And I mean, it's incredibly slight, that it does poke out ever so slightly, but it doesn't on the other one. There's literally that close. A difference. I did notice it just because I was running my fingers over the top, and that one you can feel comes out, and this one is, you know, behind. But anyway, the 2 boards are side by side, so let's have a look around. So on the top, and don't forget they're exactly the same, on the top you've got an 8-pin for your CPU power, but you've also got an additional 4-pin. When you do build your system, if you end up buying one of these, don't think that you have to use this one. Use the 8-pin as your normal, so this will be your first cable that you fit. You don't need to run this one. It's not a necessity. So if you want to keep your rig tidy, you can happily miss this one out. When we move across the top of the board, you've got the CPU fan header there. Moving further round, you've got CPU optional, and then the water pump header. So if you're running an AIO, you can smash the water pump in this. It's designed to be able to run more amps, to be able to give you better, cleaner power for your water pump, for your AIO. Or you could end up using it if you had a dedicated water cooling loop, but I think as most people will probably want to end up, you know, not necessarily bothering too much. Anyway, when we move around, we have the start and the reset button. You've got some headers here. The headers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, are so that you can disable the PCI Express slots entirely on the board. You may want to know why, but if you were, for argument's sake, to be running 2 cards in SLI and they were water cooled, so you can't take them out easily, and you were getting an error on your poster up here to say that you're having a PCI Express error, one of your cards may have been dead. So to be able to fault find that, you can flick it across, disable the lane entirely, and then if it is that card that's faulty, the system will then post. It's even more handy for big overclockers if you might have 4 cards in with LN2, for example. It's a really much quicker, easier way of fault finding. Then over here we've got retry buttons and the safe boot buttons. You have some voltage checkpoints up here. This is the slow LN2 boot mode. You've also got a memo K button, your 24-pin power. You've got 2 USB 3s here, one's a vertical and one's horizontal. Got another fan header, 4 SATA connectors here. Different controllers though, look at the colours, always keep the colours in mind because it means they're running on different controllers. You've got SATA Express here, and you've also got a U.2 connector down here for the newer drives. That you're going to see more and more of these U.2 connectors popping up. The actual hardware, as in the drives themselves, is very limited. I'm only aware of, at this present moment in time, that there are Intel ones available. And I'm just grabbing mine, and I have my dummies. So Intel do have them available at the moment with the U.2 connector. It looks like a SAS connector to me, but so you can get them. This is the flagship 1.2 terabyte model. Now, so you've got that connector down the bottom. You've also got the front panel headers. You've got 2 more fan connectors, 2 BIOS chips here, and that's so you can switch between the 2. You've got M.2 connector here, which goes up to 110 millimeters, so that the new, for argument's sake, Kingston 1 terabyte M.2 that's going to be getting released, you'll be able to pop in here. This connector down the bottom, the little Molex connector, is so that you can add more power to your PCI Express. Again, this is one of those connectors that unless you've got 4 cards in and you're experiencing problems, you don't need to use it. I really wouldn't connect it unless you have got this fully rammed with graphics cards and you are running into problems. For no other reason than, if you don't need it, it's just going to add extra mess. We do have 2 switches down the bottom, and that's you've got an SLI Crossfire X switch, and you've also got a BIOS switch down here so you can flick between the 2. You've got the Supreme FX audio down the side as well. It's actually partially covered up, but you do have the light trail that's going through, keeping the PCB separate to give you cleaner digital power on the back. And the most important thing that we can say as we're going around here, as I've missed fans and all that kind of stuff, is, like I've said, they are pretty much, well, electrically, if you were to strip them down, they're the same board underneath. There's just a very, very slight few minor differences with the aesthetics. We turn them sideways on, yet again Asus, look, you can see this is why I need new motherboard stands. These are starting to look terrible. Anyway, again, identical. We have Gigabit Ethernet. We're going to start in the middle because it's obviously the most awkward place. And then you've got a Type A and a Type C USB 3.1. 2 USB 3s with a PS2. This is lovely for overclockers. Overclockers will rejoice at seeing that compared with some of the problems we can get with USB drives. You've got your digital audio out at the back. Then you've got a DisplayPort and a HDMI. You've got your wireless and Bluetooth set up here at the back. Then you've got, I'm pretty sure all 4 of these are USB 3. The red is a little bit confusing, I'm pretty sure. And I have looked, but I'm having a bit of a brain fart. I don't think that the reds are any more 3.1s. I'm pretty sure they're all 3s. And then you have a BIOS clear button, and then you've got the BIOS flashback button as well, which is really handy because with the BIOS flashback button you can chuck a USB stick in with the latest BIOS on it, and even without not having a CPU in, just having power to the board, you can press the BIOS flashback button and it will update your BIOS without actually having to boot the system. So that can be immeasurably handy, especially if you're having problems with newer CPUs, or you don't know if you think that the BIOS isn't supporting your CPU or some hardware properly. With that feature, you can then flash up to the latest one to see if it helps you get your system running. So for the sake of the video review, the board that we're going to concentrate on today is the assembly. I have built and reviewed and tested both, but I can obviously only really get away with showing you one in the video because of the time restraints, and let's face it, I do talk too much anyway. And also, and this is probably the main point for my decision, I am also in the possession of a pair of GTX 980 Ti Matrix Platinums, and this was the first of the Asus products. We saw the bronze, you know, whatever you kind of the orangey colour that you want to call it. So it seems wrong that I wouldn't have the chance to be able to get these teamed up with the matching colour of the assembly. So this isn't technically the system that I used for the review, because we would just have had a normal 980 in there for the testing, and the memory would have been 3600 megahertz, and it would have actually been the red Corsair Dominator Platinum. But I had the GTX 980 Ti Matrix, which were the first of the ROG products to come through with the orange accents. So I thought it'd be rude not to team them up with the assembly, just so that you can get an idea. If you did want to go absolute top-end ROG and go with the orange theming, then this is something close to what you may end up with. I certainly think with the bits that I had to hand was the best system, kind of looking system that I could have put together. Moving on to the BIOS, and I'm doing this for those of you that may not have possibly seen one of the new Asus BIOSes. Now, for those of you that have, it'll all look and feel very familiar. Sometimes what you'll get is a couple of extra settings here and there that may not be there on other boards. But essentially, once you get into the advanced mode, this is how they all pretty much look now. If your Asus board, and you've got a new Asus board, doesn't look like this, then try hitting F7 and it will take you from the advanced mode into a basic mode. There's your basic mode, hit F7 and it takes you into the advanced mode. So there's a nice little shortcut for you there. Another really nice thing with the Asus BIOS is when you do come down and you get to settings, there is an explanation on pretty much all of the settings that are there. Now, if you're not 100% sure what it means, you can either Google it, or you can jump onto the Overclock 3D forums and ask us some questions there, because even I don't change everything within the whole BIOS. There are an absolute plethora of settings. I'm just trying to find Tweaker's Paradise. There we go. We've got an awful lot of stuff in there. Some of the memory timing controls are absolutely bonkers when you get slightly further down, and then they just go on for days. That is really 8-pack territory of tweaking, and it's something that I will never ever try and profess that I'm fully aware of. This is the main kind of area where you need to pay your attention. CPU and cache voltage, DRAM voltage, VCC I/O and the system agent voltage are heavily linked in getting yes, a high clock speed, but mainly that is to do with ridiculous memory. So if you're running really fast memory, then you can tweak those. Also, something that I found is you can actually turn them down a lot as well. You don't necessarily need to leave them as they are when you bang the memory and you get it on XMP. I think in the not too distant future I will get a guide done on this, just so that we can go through it and I can try and talk to you as much as I can about them. Advanced monitor boot, something that I really do like that they have is in the tool is your Asus overclocking profile. It's well worth getting your absolute basic settings saved in there to save you time later on if you have to do a BIOS clear from a bad overclock. Or just to give you something to go back to very quickly during testing. So moving directly on from the BIOS, we're going to talk about overclocking. And when it does come to overclocking with the board, there are a lot more settings in that BIOS. So if you don't necessarily know what it does or means, it doesn't mean you have to play with it. Sometimes by messing around with stuff, you can actually end up making stuff unstable. But one of the things I can say is this board is actually incredibly easy to get up and running and going. Once you've learned, or you've grasped a little bit about the BIOS, you will start to learn and tweak and do a little bit more. Just don't forget, if it goes wrong, you can clear the BIOS and go back. Also, something I found really easy is when you are really starting to push the envelope, is keep a note of what you've done, because sometimes you can look back through the stuff that you've changed and you can easily work out where you may have gone wrong. Also, don't forget, overclocking isn't about just smashing lots and lots of volts through your CPU or the subsidiary volts that go alongside it and then hoping for the best, or assuming that just going, oh yeah, I'm going to put loads of volts through that it's going to work. A lot of time, too many volts can cause more problems than it solves. So always keep in the back of your head that for a 24/7 overclock, you want to be looking for the lowest possible voltages that you can. A lot of the time, I will end up spending quite a bit of time actually stepping my voltages back and bringing them all in nice and tight. Another little bit of a hint or a guide, or a little bit of advice for you, is running a 24/7 overclock for a long period of time. You will eventually get some instability problems, and this is why I don't go handing out settings. It's easier for me to teach people how to do an overclock themselves and properly, because then when things go wrong, you're also then going to have the tools at hand to work out where the problems are. With Orca, for example, my main rig, the voltages on my CPU have needed, over the 3 years I've been running her, to be increased. So, and it's not just a case of going to and bump the CPU volts up either. There are a lot of the different voltages I've had to tweak over the period. And this is another reason why getting in with your BIOS and learning your BIOS is a really good thing to have, and it's a really good tool to have in your armory, basically. Now, more on topic with the assembly and the Extreme is the fact that they are very easy to work with. They can look a bit daunting, but every part of the tools are there, and if things aren't necessarily going right for you, I can assure you it won't be the board at fault. It'll either be a limitation with your silicon lottery, or the settings that you've put in. Now, when I overclocked my 6770K, I don't know why I've got 4s in my head at the moment, but anyway, 6770K. Generally what I do is I have a very set review procedure that I go through, and essentially what I do is we pop some 2666 memory in, and we put that out on an XMP setting, and then we run all of our stock settings like that without any other changes on the boards. Then when it comes to the overclock setting, I pop in some 3600 megahertz kit. We're now running red Corsair Dominator Platinum. And then we do that, we put that on XMP and see if that will initially boot and post. This did very easily, but you'd be amazed how many boards don't. And then we start working on our overclock with 3600 megahertz enabled. The first thing I do is I keep the base clock at 100, and we try and get it running at a 48 multiplier, so 4.8 gigahertz with 3600 megahertz memory, see how tight we can get all the settings, and then we run a stability test with OCCT. Again, this did it really easily. But then we do something which a lot of other places don't seem to bother with. We then double the base clock up to 200, and we work our overclock up from that point. Once I got to a multiplier of 24 for a 4.8 gigahertz overclock, so 24 times 200, 4800, I run another stability test. And with a lot of boards, that's the point where things stop. And if they get past that at reasonable volts, some boards have wanted up to 1.4 volts to get that running and 100% stable. What we ended up doing with the Rampage was it absolutely blitzed it, and we were running it at volts that we would have been expecting for a lower overclock. So I then started to increase further the base clock, and I ended up with a 205.03 bus speed, so that's your base clock, times 24, which gave me 4.92 gigahertz. But also, where I kept the memory divider the same, we went up from 3600 megahertz up to 36,888. On the screenshot, you'll see it reads 1844. Essentially, if you double 1844, double data rate, you get 3688. So we ended up running a 4.9 gigahertz overclock with almost 3700 megahertz of memory. I personally think that the memory had more to give us because I could have slackened the timings off a little bit more and spent a little bit more time on that. I could get the CPU, if I turn the memory divider down one, I could get the bus speed up to 210. So we were getting close to the 5 gigahertz mark with that one. Actually, no, I believe it was just over the 5 gigahertz mark, but it wasn't stable. It needed a lot more tweaking to go on with it. But again, we were actually running that at volts lower than we've had other boards do the 4.8 gigahertz. So in the end, the volts that I'd manually put into the bars were 1.375, and with the load line calibration, they were going up to about 1.38. So that's a good, you know, kind of, it's an in-depth look at the overclocking for a review, for most reviews, but it's kind of basic when you're actually, if you were looking at this as like a guide point of view. This is just me trying to give you a really good in-depth look at the overclocking. But like I said, we will be doing some guides in the not too distant future, and I'm going to be doing probably going to end up using the Ranger just to kind of show you that you can start with the basic ones and then work your way up. But anyway, on to some results. Now, one thing I always forget to say in the videos, and I want to make sure that I say it today, please click the link or the card or whatever you want to do. It'll be in the description. You can click the review link and you can click the card to go to the Overclock 3D website. That's where we've got all the pictures, all the graphs as well, because I only show you a small snippet here. And you can read the full meaty conclusion at the end of the written review as well. But also you can go and discuss your thoughts on the video and the review on the Overclock 3D forums. If you do join and don't get your authentication email, or you have tried before and didn't get your authentication email, either use the contact us link on the forums or tweet us or something like that, and I will personally manually add you, because all I need to do is turn you to an approved member, and all it is because your email client has either put it in your spam or your client is just not delivering it to you at all. It's just a problem that we're working through at the moment, but it's something to keep in mind going forward. Anyway, right, we're going to start with 3D Mark, because 3D Mark is a bit of a mixed bag. The overclock is absolutely right at the top, but when we were running the stock results, it didn't actually do that well in the stock results. The great deal of the other stock results that we did, the Extreme and the Assembly, actually pretty much topped both ends of the graph, both the stock results and the overclock results. But we wanted to kind of give you a bit of a mix, so we've purposely chosen to put this in. What you will also notice is I've put the Extreme and the Assembly, as in the red and the orange ones, in the graph at the same point. They performed so similarly. Some of the results were in like 2 or 3 points difference, and that's really a run tolerance that I didn't see the point in putting both of them in the graphs individually. So we've just ramped them in together, and what we've ended up doing is using the results for the Assembly, and then, you know, that kind of makes its own mind up, because they are extremely pretty much just a color change on the boards and the stuff that comes in the boxes. So we've got those results. We move on to X264, which is another quite a long calculation, and it's quite stressing as well. I do find with X264, when the overclocks are really at the screaming edge, this is one of the programs that will start to fail. So the fact that we managed to get the overclock on this to pass is actually a really big shout about how stable it was. So we've got that again. You can see that the stock results, it's at the top, and then you can also see that the overclock results, it's again at the top. When we come to Cinebench, the stock results was only really beaten by the Maximus VIII formula, but only in the OpenGL test, and by only in the CPU test, and only by 1 point. Again, it could have been a run tolerance. It didn't seem to massively make a difference with the difference in the overclock, because with the formula we didn't run it at quite such a high overclock. When we go on to gaming, I'm just going to let you look at it. You can pause the video, you can have a look through there, but you can see that they're both very near the top. Well, one is at the top and one is way above a lot of the other overclocks. One thing I will say with this is you do need to kind of contend that it can be very GPU limited, but the fact that this, even in some of the stock runs, is mainly kind of a game thing. We've obviously had to deal with driver updates and stuff like that, and we can't retest every board and every card and every game for every review, otherwise we'd never get any work done. But the actual strength of the overclock and the stock runs on this speak for themselves when it comes to the gaming results there. So, conclusion, and the boxes have magically appeared. Now this is going to be a complicated one for me to get through because there's a lot I want to kind of try and explain. So, if you don't like long conclusions, you're not going to like this one. So essentially, we've got two incredibly similar boards, but with a bit of a colour change. Now, why have they done that? Well, I personally think that with all of the other red boards that have come out with all the other manufacturers, essentially the red and black theme has become a bit cheap. So essentially what Asus have done with the assembly and the 980 Ti matrix is they've kind of gone with a slightly different colour scheme for their absolute top end leading products. So what we've now got is actually kind of a very, very clever product stack, because you've got the Maximus VIII formula, which is the dark, understated board with the armour, kind of very gamery type of orientated, kind of in the mid segment of the market. They've added the RGB to that too, with lights all over the place, so you can colour match that to your heart's content. Then you move on to the Maximus VIII Extreme. The red and black is still there. It's a slightly more expensive board, but it's there for those of you that may have one of the older matrices or want to go with the original red and black theme. You're still a fan of what ROG stands for, or what the ROG red and black stands for. But then, and I'm probably one of them, that I've got a little bit bored with the red and black being so prevalent, and then they've gone and now they've brought out the assembly. Now the assembly is much more expensive. You're looking at about £500 now for this board. But what it does bring you is you've got that DAC amp, that if you've not got the 5.2, if you've not got the optical base slot to put it in, you can run it externally if you want. And you've also got that first 10 gigabit port or add-in card that I've seen. And that's literally the first kind of mainstream product like that I've seen at all. Now, yes, it's not on the board, but I can remember back in the day when Gigabit wasn't on the board. So the fact that it's an absolute new one there is, I mean, I've looked around at some of the cards, and some of the cards online, they can cost £150 on their own. But if you're looking at this as a long-term investment, having that add-in card there could mean that you're not going to have to swap your rig further down the line. It could be a big old thing. Now, I'm going to admit the fact that the assembly carries a huge price tag, absolutely huge price tag. Now you may think to yourself, I'm not going to use that DAC, and I'm not going to use the add-in card. So really, am I paying all that money for the colour change? Well, you know, sadly, when it does come down to that point, yes, because the two boards do pretty much perform identically. Just both as easy to overclock, both as easy to kind of work with. They do look very similar, and really it's going to come down to your personal choice. So if you're just after performance and you want to try and save a few quid, then you can go with this one. If you like the eye candy, you might have already bought the GTX 980 Ti Matrix and you want something that's going to match with that. Sadly, you are just going to have to dig deep, turn the sofa upside down, and end up buying this one. So, with the awards, what I ended up deciding to do was give the Maximus VIII Extreme the Performance Award, because the performance is there, but it is expensive. And then we gave the Extreme Assembly the Innovation Award for those extra add-in things. And to be honest with you, it's almost innovative that they've moved away from the black and red and gone orange as well. But obviously, the performance is identical. Now, I did think about giving them both the Performance Award, but in the end, we decided to go with just the red badge for this one, and then just the orange badge for this one. And believe me, the fact that the Innovation Award is orange is just a coinky-dink. So don't go getting any dodgy thoughts. Essentially, they are really, really nice boards. They perform well. They are really easy to work with. You're just going to need to kind of give a little bit of thought down to the aesthetics, because if it was me, I would literally be choosing between these two on whether I wanted red or orange. The 10G card, that may be a swinger, it may be a swinger for some of those of you out there that are really, really into your networking. One thing I can say, just as a little bit of a drip feed, I have seen some images about Asus are going to be coming into the switch market, and we are going to be, or there is going to be in the not too distant future, some Asus 10 gig switches. So we're going to be getting a lot more stuff to kind of work with that 10G card. So you may be jumping on the bandwagon nice and early, but let's face it, if you've got it and then later on you can start upgrading your network, and especially if you're like me that's got a home server and really likes messing around with routers and all that type of stuff, this could actually be a really good choice for you, especially if you're looking at buying a high-end card anyway, which may or may not have ended up being one of the, or two of the matrices, because they look so nice together. But anyway, so that's the conclusion. Innovation Award, said enough about it. Performance Award kind of speaks for itself. Both of them equally as good, but yes, this one, when it comes to the price, does sting more than a stick in your arm in a beehive. But it's just going to be one of those ones where you're either going to get some ointment and go and deal with it, or you're just going to moan and moan and moan and moan. And I think people that are going to moan about the price in this one would have had no interest in buying it in the first place. So, controversial ending to that one. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the two boards. I think now you can kind of understand why I yomped these two reviews together, or maybe that I was lazy with this one and then this one ended up turning up, so it made more sense. Which one do you think it was, children? Anyway, I've actually really liked working with these two, and you can also see how pretty the orange can look as well, so keep that in mind, campers. But this is Tiny Tom Logan with another video for you out. Ding! Why do I do ding? When did I start doing ding? Someone tell me when ding started. Find the first ding video, post it underneath.